Welcome back, or welcome for the first time. You are tuning into your Holistic Health Revolutionary Show, where if you can take just one lesson or inspiration away, apply it with a firm intention and with speed, I guarantee that you will become a completely transformed individual by the end of our time together. It's all about consistency. And consistency is building confidence. Okay, it's the process of building confidence, right? So confidence isn't something that's overnight. Whether you lack it, whether you haven't delved into the subject in depth of how you could master it in order to maximize your existence, confidence is key. And it only comes from doing things, whether we are good at them or trying to become excellent at them. We have to do them consistently. So I want us to understand that even though there is a road going forward that may be long, arduous, trying, new, then we still have to understand and harness and embrace that same energy, that it is worth it, and it will build much more than confidence. It will build competence. All right. So I am your host of the Hueman Health Show, Zulu Zeke Kali, your holistic performance enhancement specialist, where we are in this current times. I think it is very important that we speak about something that is so foundational in human life, and that is trade. I have so much to speak about today, so I'm going to try and keep it on topic. All right. And I think that if we can cover some basics, if I can bring up some things again that can compel you and intrigue you, and cause you to think, cause you to table some discussions that really, warm up the minds of the world that we exist in, then I think that will be a success. So we are in the third installment of our series. Now, again, as always, this series is titled something that I genuinely believe is truth. This is not a this is not a title that has been taken out of context, or a title that has been inflated just to get views. This is a title that I am I'm trying to evoke thought. I'm trying to really get my people to think, to ponder on their existence and the way that they interact in that, the way that it builds the future for them, in the way that it gives them grounds to stand on. Okay, so today's topic, three elements more corrosive than cops or COVID to the Black Lives Matter movement, and to Black lives in general, and Black continuity in general. And today we are speaking about financial health. Okay, we are speaking about collective financial progress. Okay, and that takes, as we spoke about, a group consciousness, right? That takes understanding the power that we have. But before we can even understand what power is, or where our power is, we have to do a deep defining, figuring out the pathway to power, right? And what does power mean to a people? How is power acquired, by a people, for a people, and how do they harness that? How do they use that? How do they sustain that? We hear conservative, we hear progressive, we hear liberal. What do those things mean? How do those things blend into how people spend their money? These are questions that are existing all around us, and as adults, we should be well invested in what those mean. Okay, so it's going to be important, of course, as always, to start off by examining why are we looking at this topic today. Okay, today we are wanting to understand specifically why why there's a child's play attempt at acquiring currency and then establishing wealth and then passing that down and then building institutions with that wealth. Not necessarily banking institutions or financial institutions, but more so institutions in a community to fight gentrification, knowing the plan that is up against us. So it is a deep discussion. Do I have all the answers? No. Am I looking? Yes. Does this take a multitude of people? Yes. It takes group conscious. It takes a group consciousness in action. You see what I mean? So today's book, just to show that it's possible, when it was possible, when there was no social media, okay, when there was no reporting of when somebody was murdered extrajudiciously or hung after being, charged and then, prosecuted guilty in a court, not of their peers. So this is genuine proof of what is possible. Okay. And it's important that we read this. We must study this. We must, take time to understand where we come from. The only thing in our Black history isn't just the marches. It's not just the speeches. It takes groundwork. It took money to fund those. It took money to fund a movement. So I want us to think about that, to think about how this is not going to be a one summer, climb. No matter how many allies we have, it's going to be important that we understand today's topic, which is financial. Okay, group consciousness. Okay, we're going to speak about a lot of things today, but I want us to take what we're speaking about, and I really desire this to be tabled amongst your peers, amongst your family members. Okay, I want you to go out and get some literature. Okay, go out and get this book. You can probably find it, used or at the local, your local urban bookstore. Not expensive at all. Okay, Hannibal Johnson, Black Wall Street, From Riot to Renaissance in Tulsa's historic Greenwood District. Okay, so it tells you about the beauty, and then it tells you about the brutality of those who, have structured the system, which it's so difficult to establish financial and generational capital and land ownership. So it's important that we study that so that it does not recur. So why is today's topic relevant for examination? Ask yourself, why is it important that we examine our financial practices today? No, yeah, don't worry, I'll wait. It's important to understand the factors of trade, the arena that trade occurs in, so that we do not lose the game. Okay? We must understand first and foremost that we are humans. Okay? And humans are made differently. Why? Because we flourished in different regions. Different regions have different forms of trade, which is why now we have so many different acceptable forms of world currency. Right? So before that occurred, there were different monetary structures, monetary systems for people to go about in their region. Okay, whether that be a village, whether that be a springing up city, a town, or any part of an empire. Okay, I want us to understand that it was not always ATM machines. It was not always, banking establishments in such large stature, right? But I want us to understand that in different areas, think in different countries and continents, right? Because countries are still a new concept, right? In continents, there were different forms of life. Life involves trade, right? Trade involves giving X for Y and receiving X for Y. Okay, so whatever we're trading, if it's food, if it's goods, if it's munitions, if it's livestock, whatever it may be, right? There was a form of payment for that. Okay, in the same way, in expansion, trying to acquire land, trying to acquire goods in order to build upon land. in order to get labor, to plow land. These different things, they are finances. They're financings, right? So this is why, marriage is so different nowadays, right? That used to be a very big portion of the discussion of why people would get together, right? Were the parents able to, help the male child raise him up to a point where he was established and able to provide, and then therefore, be able to provide for his new bride, right? So who's been provided for by, her parents her entire life. So it's important that we understand that these sort of interactions were sort of laced in deeper confines than just, showing up to work, getting a check, and then seeing and buying, seeing and spending. It's important that we get an intimate relationship with finances, with currency, and not just to end up using more financial establishments, but to understand where our money's coming from and going and being saved, and how we can maximize what we are making, right? So let's breeze. Our entire way of reasoning right now, and this is in a vast umbrella, our entire way of reasoning is based in a structure that is not meant for our progress. It's not meant for our benefit. It's not meant for, our prosperity, right? We are very aware, and we cannot allow the truth to be swept away or to be brushed away or covered up by any form of justification or excuse. But we understand how this country came to be. We understand that this land was taken forcefully, brutally, and we understand that there was another entire, an entire culture, an entire ethnicity, an entire portion of a continent of people, millions upon millions of people, stripped from their land, brought thousands of miles, and then dropped on new land and forced to work in the most brutal conditions known to mankind, and with some of the most brutal torture known to mankind. So, this system here, when it was set up off of that, it was not meant for people that look like us, people that are black and brown. It was not meant for us to share this, prosperity that we see, that we cry out so often for, that why can't we get a piece? If you look at the lending statistics, then you'll be able to understand how few black men, women, families, institutions, banks, businesses just starting, how many of them get turned down for loans? They get turned down, for investments. And it has nothing to do with the business plan or the pitch not being together or not. It is simply just that fact, right? It's easy to have an unspoken rule. Look at Kaepernick, look at that now, so I think it's important for us to understand the roots of that. And it's rooted in white supremacy, and we have to study that. We have to understand that. We have to get that out of there, and we have to deal with that. Right? And once we deal with that, then we can create a real system of where there is actual, genuine financial progress and prosperity within our group. And then from there, we're producing goods and able to trade with other groups at that point. And it has to be thought about like that, because it's thought about in that vein and in that voice by every other group. Right? We just don't have that group consciousness yet, but we've got to get it now, because if not now, then when? So that is a root of the oppression of our people. That's carried out through, that's a lot. The logical governmental theory is to, how should I put this? Because think of, think of all the systems in which the government provides for its citizens, right? So it's a lot of programs. And what are most of the outcries from parents, in the urban areas who can't afford better, education or housing or, care, for their children? what is the outcry? You know, that they need more assistance because they don't have the finances for it, or they don't have the time to be involved at the school. The schooling doesn't teach to what their children, relate to. Their children are over policed at the school, not only by security guards, but also by the staff, the teachers. So, in essence, what would you think the outcome would be? What would be the outcome if we were genuinely given an equal education? There's a job shortage still in a lot of places. So where are us newly educated or, equally, genuinely, equally intelligent black men and women, where are we going to get the jobs? So we have to think about how the finances are going to be generated, where those products are going to come from. And then we have to start thinking about how that can be generated by us, because that's the important foundation of that. That's going to be the root of genuine progress, is employing our people. We see how the NFL, treats our people, and imagine how many of our strong and highly capable men, if they took their talents and had businesses. There's an NFL Players Association, that players union, for the black members. They could create many a business, and go ahead and employ these men, in an area where they can speak out or be a part of the movement in a very productive way. There are many items that we're going to speak about that is going to be, key for us, that we need alternatives to, because we don't have alternatives. So it's important to understand that we have the service, we have the capability, we have the manpower, and we have the intelligence. We need the unity of it, and we have to look outside of the set up structured means that are structured in order for others to gain off of our labor. I mean, think of our entertainers, think of the athletes. How much do they make? Even those who make 60, 70, 80 million dollars, right? Hundreds of millions of dollars. How much, because they are making that, because of their advertisements, because of the marketing that they're involved in and the products that they generate and create, how much are they making? You got to add an entire another zero to that, right? So if it's 300 million, it's 3 billion, right? And you think of the seats that are filled in the stadiums. You think of the jerseys that are sold, or the concert merch. You think of the shoes that are sold. You think of all of the different pieces that go along with it, right? So it's important to understand, like we spoke about, like I spoke about before, the sports industry re-examined. There's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle, that go into it. Communications, marketing, sponsorship, the physical trainers. We need physicians, naturopathic physicians in mass, so that people can understand their ease and access to their health. So we'll speak about that. But it's important for us to understand, why we wouldn't necessarily be given, when a country was built for the supremacy, the conservation of the supremacy of a racial caste, right? So with that, they would never, ever, 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 ever educate the people who they had enslaved, whether they let them out, whether they've signed a piece of paper or not. They're not going to allow them to get the same access to opportunity for elevation. It's just not the mentality that they would have. It's just not the mentality that they would have. So that is the base of conservatism. Conservatism is trying to conserve what the original state was, you know, what has been acquired, the wealth of slavery, you know, so let's get into that, you know. So how do we interact with the world financially? My fellow humans, I mean, you came to the Hueman Health Show for a reason, to understand, to you know, to expand, and to rub along new lines of information, right? That's why you tune in to Rainer Avenue Radio, to get genuine information, you know, to shed the misinformation and get dialed in and tapped in so that you can elevate, right? So if we think about how we interact on a worldwide financial scale, it really is see and spend. Now, I'm not saying that when you see something and you like its manufacturing, if you like its aesthetic, if you like its utility, if you are appreciative of the design, I have nothing against that. But I do want us to understand that when you look at anything in your house, I'm hoping you guys are panning around in your house. How many things that were made in Africa do you see? How many different categories? How many different categories of things do you see? Like books, like a yoga mat, like a sign, like a hat, shoes. How many? Don't worry, I'll wait. It's not that it's not necessarily at this moment that we are not capable. It's that we don't create what we need. We are highly athletic, but there is no actual shoe company that's just as great or greater. Why wouldn't it be greater, since we have all of the majority of the elite athletes in each and every field? And I say that for testing purposes, right? For research and development purposes of different movement patterns, right? Of different sports, of different skill sets, of different sizes, you know, of humans. So I say that, why is there no Nike that I can get, you know, why is there no African Nike that I can get my running shoes from, my trail running shoes from, my racing shoes from, right? Why can't I get, you know, workout gear manufactured in Africa, you know, for my practice? You know, why can't I be able to source all of those materials there? Why can't I get kettlebells, you know, forged in Africa? You know, it's important to understand that these things that we need, you know, like headphones, you know, we love music so much. You know, what about phones? I'm recording on a phone that is amazing, but it would be even more amazing if some of these things that I'm naming to you, some of these things, you know, that I'm naming to you were actually made in Africa, you know, because then that would be feeding back into our community, you know. So that interacting in the world financially is a very important thing to understand, because where you spend your money grows. And where you take your money away from gets smaller. So if you're continuously putting money back into your community, it's fine to spend outside of your community, right? But when you only have options to spend outside of your community for everything, you know, then you find yourself in a very precarious situation, you know. So we see that the relationship between banks and individual men, women, you know, and families that are of Black origin, African American especially, especially here I'm speaking about African American, because there's a very deep-rooted structural systemic racism around oppressing and suppressing the prosperity and the progress of it, the thoughts of any equality, and definitely the reality of it, right? And we also have to examine what kind of equality we want, because if we're talking about equality with a people who have done what they've done, is that really the equality that we want as a society? Is that the equality that we want, you know, for our children? Is that the equality that we can say, you know, this is going to be the best, you know, for the world going forward in 7 generations? I don't think so. You know, I think there's a much better way, and I believe that is why the way of being African-centered makes sure that you are centering your decisions for generations to come around practices and principles and practices put in place persistently years and decades on in, to ensure that there is a continuity and a flourishing of group that takes group consciousness. So please go back, and if you haven't heard that installment, part 2, you know, a group consciousness is very, very important. You know, so let's understand that there are other financial systems. You know, there are plenty of financial, financial investments, strategies that are rooted in African society, Caribbean society. Do I have all the answers? No. Do I know where to get, resources? Yes, I do. You know, and these are things that once they're tabled, then we can work towards solutions on those things. You know, you think of susus, you think of tauntauns. You know, these are really just institutions where groups of people, groups of families are putting in, and then on one date or another, everybody, one person gets to get the full pool and puts that into their business. Everybody then continues to put into the pool to receive their pitch, or their date, so they can pull and create a business. But while that is occurring, they are spending money and getting everything that they would need that is provided there from there and from there only. Okay, so we're going to expound upon that in a bit. Okay, I really appreciate you guys joining me today on the Hueman Health Show. Again, as a holistic performance enhancement specialist, remember a lot of stuff is mental. Okay, and a lot of stuff it takes a commitment, and it takes a deep intention. So I really appreciate your intention and your commitment to coming here to Rainer Avenue.